Well, I'm glad to see you all here today. Will be an interesting session, I think, at least I hope so. It's the subject of this whole conference, which this is the last day of, has been Theodore Roosevelt in various aspects of his life, and more particularly various things he touched upon, like international affairs, all kinds of different areas. And to a large extent, but not entirely, we've left it up to you all to convert it into what some of the issues are that we're facing today. The Theodore Roosevelt Institute is a new operation here at LIU. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Tweed Roosevelt. I'm a professor here at LIU, and I'm also the chairman of the Long Island Institute, and I'm also a great-grandson of Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt, please. Roosevelt, no Roosevelts in the room. So this is a kind of our initial launch of what kinds of things we want to do. Some with the high school, some have high school students come here. So in a sense, you're guinea pigs, so be free to tell us what you think about things. Today, in this session, we have Bill Bleyer, who's an old friend of mine. He, for 30 years, was a reporter with Newsday, reporting on all things Long Island. But as far as I care, the most important part was on Theodore Roosevelt and the various issues and things that came up. He's also written 4 books, and I think you'll find him quite interesting. So without further ado,
okay, let's see if this works. Yes, okay. All right. Theodore Roosevelt is the most famous Roosevelt to end up in the Oyster Bay area, but he's not the first. That distinction goes to his grandfather, Cornelius von Scott Roosevelt, who's a successful New York businessman. He comes out to escape the city heat in the summers, sometime during the Civil War in the 1860s. He starts renting a house for the summer, and he brings out his children, including Theodore Roosevelt Sr., who's the father of the future president. TR, who's known as TD, as a child born 3 days ago in 1858 in New York City. He suffers from asthma, which you probably know about. He's a very sickly child. His parents and other people that know the family are afraid he won't survive childhood. So when he would have an asthma attack in the middle of the night, his father put him in a carriage, right up along the Hudson, or out as far as Oyster Bay, which is 25 miles from the family house on 20th Street. So the fresh air and the excitement seemed to cure the asthma attacks, but TR gets a very early attachment to Oyster Bay. And his father, the family is staying, even before TR was born, with Cornelius, and then Cornelius dies in 1871. TR Sr. spends the summers with his family elsewhere, and then starts renting a house out in Oyster Bay. This is Theodore Sr., TR's father. They start renting this house called Tranquility between Oyster Bay, Hamlet, and what becomes Sagamore Hill. This is an actual photograph of the Roosevelt family. His mother, not working. Okay, up on the porch on the right is TR's mother, Minnie. And, okay, definitely not working. The woman sitting out in the lower left corner is Edith Carew, who's a family friend who plays a very important part of the Roosevelt story that you'll hear as we go along. So they're there in 1874, and by this point, TR is a teenager, and this is a great photograph. You have TR upper left, his brother Elliot up in the upper right, Sister Corinne in the middle, and down the left is Edith Carew again. Now, she grows up in Washington Square in Manhattan, very near the Roosevelts, and she's almost like a member of the family. She's very friendly with all the Roosevelt children, but particularly TR because they share an interest in literature and poetry, and he will row her around Oyster Bay Harbor, and they will talk, recite poetry, talk about books. She would spend most of the summer with the Roosevelts at Tranquility. So the mornings they're out on the water, in the afternoons they're riding horseback, hiking through the woods. And visiting Roosevelt cousins staying in the area. So various Roosevelts are renting in this area. It becomes kind of a Roosevelt enclave until 1880, when T.R.'s Uncle James decides to actually buy property in Sagamore Hill. And this 1880 is an important year in Roosevelt history because he graduates from Harvard. He marries his sweetheart, Alice Lee, up in Massachusetts. They honeymoon in tranquility in Oyster Bay, and then T.R. decides to buy property as well. Alice is on the left, T.R. there is on the right, and her cousin Rose is in the middle because this is a proper Victorian family, and you need a chaperone until they're married. So it's kind of an interesting way to go about your romantic life. So T.R. buys 155 acres in the fall after he graduates with the intention of building a permanent house. Now, he's from the upper class New York City society. Most of these people are very rich. They can buy a big house in the city, and they can have a summer house out in Long Island or wherever they want to be. T.R.'s father is a philanthropist who gives away most of the family money to start things like the Metropolitan Opera and Museum of Natural History. So T.R., as one of the four siblings, shares what's left, so he's comfortable but not rich. So when he buys the property, he's planning to build one house that will be a permanent year-round residence for his family. And this is a map from the 1880s showing Cove Neck. If you look on the left there in the cove, you can see T. Roosevelt. That's his 155 acres. He has so little money that he has to sell a lot of that property to relatives right after he buys it. He and his wife are basically living in the city. He's planning to run for the state assembly in his 20s, so there's no immediate plans to build at Sagamore Hill, which he names after an Algonquin chief named Sagamore Mulhannes. But they're planning to build eventually, so he hires an architect who's a friend of the family. They walk the property, and one day he takes a double-sided sheet of paper when he's walking the property and sketches what the property looks like. And on the top, it's overlooking Oyster Bay. And there's farm fields on the top of the hill that's marked. And then down to the bottom, you have a forested hill going down to the shore of Coldstream Harbor, where it says eelgrass on the shore. He buys the property because he likes the water and wants to get out and use the water. So this is really interesting. When I started researching my book, this is the first thing the archivist at Sagamore Hill put in my hands. And what's even cooler is on the back, he sketches out his idea for the dream house he wants to build. And if you compare this to the blueprints of Sagamore Hill, this is exactly what he got. The architects basically turned this into a working plan and building his dream house. So before they build the actual house, they decide to build, it's a working farm, so they build what they call the stable and lodge in 1883. It's actually a working barn on the first floor, it looks like a house, and upstairs is where the farm manager and his helper live. And they developed plans for the main house, and they ultimately built exactly what's shown here. But before they could build the house, a couple things happen. T.R. wins his assembly race, so his focus is now in New York City and the district he's representing, and in Albany, where the legislature meets. The big thing that delays construction is on Valentine's Day in 1884. The family is at his mother's house in the city. His mother dies of typhoid fever in the morning, and that night his wife dies from kidney failure. So he loses the two most important women in his life in the same day on Valentine's Day. T.R. is prone to depression, and this sends him into a pretty good depression. So he decides to, he's already bought 2 ranches out in Dakota. He decides he will finish his term in Albany, then head out to Dakota to do ranching and basically get over his grief. Meanwhile, a week before his wife dies, she gives birth to a daughter also named Alice. This is her a little bit later. And Alice is staying with T.R.'s sister Fanny in the city. And before he heads out to Dakota, she said, I know you're suffering from a lot of grief, but you need to think about Alice's future. She needs to have a permanent home. So a week after his wife dies, he signs the contract to build a house and then heads out to the Dakotas. So he leaves Bambi in charge of his daughter and also overseeing construction of Sagamore Hill. The same construction company down from the Five Towns builds the house. They put the Roosevelt family motto over the door by the on the porch, and that it's Dutch because they're a Dutch family, and it translates into "He who has planted will preserve." TR lives up to that family motto because, as I said, it's a working farm, and between 40 and 95 acres of the property is actually a working farm during his life there. So the house is built under Banner's supervision. This is what it looks like initially, because it's built on a farm field. There's no landscaping whatsoever. TR comes back periodically from the Dakotas to visit. Sometimes in the winter he stays with Bambi in the city, or in the summer he comes out and stays. Bambi has set up housekeeping at Sagamore Hill, and TR will come and join them. In 1885, he comes and spends the whole summer there. As you may have heard yesterday, he's into fox hunting. He organizes a fox hunt, and the famous TR incident, he's chasing a fox. His horse goes lame, but TR tries to jump the fence anyhow. The horse and he end up falling onto a rock pile. TR breaks an arm. He's all bloody. He wipes himself off, puts a sling on his thing, and continues the remaining couple of miles of the fox hunt. Goes back to Sagamore. His daughter is waiting. Sees her father with a sling and all bloody, and shrieks in terror, runs back to the house. TR cleans himself up and then presides over a hunt dinner at the house like nothing ever happened. So, as I mentioned, he's coming back to New York periodically. Now, I showed you the picture before of Edith Carreau, who's there on the right with her sister Emily. They were extremely close growing up, and at some point in their later teenage years, they have a big breakup fight, and they don't see each other for years, to the point where, because she's close to everybody in the family, when he comes to stay at Bambi's house, he always says to her, before I come, you have to make sure that Edith won't be there, so I don't run into her. But somehow in 1884, TR is coming to Bambi's house. The door opens and Edith comes out, which I'm personally convinced was something that Bambi engineered, because she, I think, realized that TR was not a happy widower and that the two of them belonged together. And people assumed from childhood that they would end up together. So they rekindle their friendship. They get secretly engaged. In the fall of 1886, TR comes back for good from the Dakotas, and he decides to run for mayor in New York as a Republican. And that wasn't any easier then than it would be now. TR was trounced, as he expects. He and Edith sail for Europe. They're married in London, and then they honeymoon for 4 months in Europe. So they come back, and Edith now has to move into a house that was built for TR's first wife, initially even named after her, and then move into a house decorated by TR's sister Bambi and make it her own. So this is what she moves into, and she's a very conservative, quiet, upper-class New York woman. TR is outgoing, boisterous, and a hunter. So this is the front hall, which served as a living room initially. So she's moving into this house full of animal trophies. She accepts that because she knows who TR is. But she decides the front parlor by the front door is her space, and it will be decorated in a more feminine style, light blue wallpaper and family furniture handed down on the side of the family. But you notice even there's animal skins. There's 3 animal skin rugs, including one that she requested when Admiral Peary goes off to find the Arctic Circle, the North Pole. She says, "Bring me back a polar bear," and he does, and that's on the floor of her parlor. TR, his personal space is across the hall in the library. There's a picture up there of the upper left of his father, who he says is the best man he's ever met. But this is where he does his writing, and and has visitors who come all the time. This is TR in the library. TR wants a large family. Edith, probably not so much, but TR gets his way, and they start populating the house with children. First there's Ted, and then Kermit is born in Washington. TR at this point has been appointed to the Federal Service Commission in 1889 by President Benjamin Harrison. So he's in Washington. Edith is in Oyster Bay when she gives birth prematurely to Kermit. TR wants to go see his son and check on his wife. Well, the trains have left Washington for New York for the day, so TR, being TR, hires his own train, gets to Oyster Bay at 4 o'clock in the morning, and gets to see his new son. Second daughter, Ethel, comes along, and as you can see from this picture, she's a tomboy who does her best to keep up with her 2 older brothers. Then comes Archie, who is Theodore Roosevelt's grandfather, and he's born in Washington. TR leaves Washington in 1895 for 2 years to run the New York City Police Board, which makes him basically police commissioner. Then President McKinley appoints him to the Assistant Navy Secretary in 1897, so they're back in Washington when Quentin, Quentin, the last child and the one most like TR, was born in 1897. So that brings the family to the full size. And this is a famous portrait shot outside the dining room in Sagamore Hill. So TR comes back. TR leaves the War Department to help form the Rough Riders and fight in the Spanish-American War, which is a war that he helped foment, and heads off in a uniform that he has custom made for him at Brooks Brothers in New York. The war is short. He does the famous charge of Reed's of San Juan Hill, comes back as a national hero. The Republicans in New York are looking for a gubernatorial candidate, and they come to Sagamore Hill and designate TR to run. He wins by a landslide at age 40. He then becomes a reformer in Albany, which is run by corrupt party hacks, so they immediately decide they need to get rid of him. So after trying various methods to get him out of Albany, they persuade McKinley to make TR his running mate for when McKinley runs for re-election. This is a great photograph. You talk about media manipulation. The two of them never posed together, so this is like a Photoshop predecessor. They pose separately, and the photographer merges the 2 pictures together. And if you look really close, you can see the dividing line in the bushes there. But this is widely circulated, early fake news. So TR is famously bad at managing money. Edith gives him $20 in pocket money every morning. By the end of the day, it's gone. And when she said, "What did you spend it on?" he can never even remember. Luckily, she's a great money manager, and she manages not only the house, but she manages the working farm and all the employees. And she keeps meticulous records. This is one of her account books. Some of them are at Harvard, some of them are at Sagamore Hill. And if you go down and list all the different merchants she's buying from in the Oyster Bay and Glen Cove area, and what she's buying, right down to the bottom where she lists a description for the Long Islander newspaper in Huntington. Now, I mentioned that TR is not wealthy at this point by the standards of his peers, but they're a large family, and they need to maintain the house and raise the kids. So she has a cook, a waitress, a chambermaid, and a nurse to take care of Alice in the beginning. They have a resident farmer and an assistant. But this is just a small fraction of what a comparable family would employ. It's just that this is all they can really afford. The farm is a working farm. They raise horses and cows, hogs, and chickens. They plant wheat and rye. They have a big apple orchard. Most of this food is used on the estate to feed the family and the staff, but some of it is sold to bring in some income. So meanwhile, after a decade or two, the house is starting to look more lived in. It looks pretty much like it does now with trees growing up that they planted. TR is a loving and outgoing and doting father. And you can imagine what it would be like to be one of the Roosevelt children growing up with this adventurous father figure who loves to play with his children. Early on, he gets them all interested in the things that he likes, which is nature and hunting and outdoor sports. So you have, Quentin out there looking for June bugs. This is more typical. This is a football game involving the children and their cousins. Quentin and Ethel were watching. The rest of them were playing fairly vigorous tackle football. Two sites come up frequently in family reminiscences about their athletic activity. They originally there was only one building on the property called the Old Barn, which is shown here. They would have races timed by Theodore. You can see that went there with the stopwatch. They have to run through the barn, tunnel through bales of hay, to walk across the beams and on the loft, and follow this course, and then come back, and Theodore would give them their time. And Ted later said he competed like this was the Olympics. The other more interesting thing was this hill back there on the right side called Cooper's Bluff on the northwest corner of Coat Neck. They would do a lot of hiking, and their favorite type of hiking was called a point-to-point. And one of the children, or TR, would just sort of close his eyes and point in a direction, and they have to go follow that direction no matter where it took them. So if they had a building, they have to climb through or over the building. They had a pond, they have to swim across in their clothes. So they did a lot of that. But the place they went to most is Cooper's Bluff, which is a very sandy, loose sand, glacial hill. You can see back on the right corner there. And they would race up or down that hill, and you look at that steep slope, and you can sort of imagine what would happen. And Ted wrote in one of his memoirs, he said, "One late autumn afternoon when Mother was not with us, we had a race down the bluff. We reached the bottom dusty, bruised, and breathless. This was all very well for the boys, who'd enjoyed it greatly, and to whom a scar more or less made no difference. But my sister Alice got a gash on her forehead. When we reached home, Father was in deep disgrace." They loved to ride. TR had several horses. The children all had horses, as did their mother. TR was into guns, and kids grew up in a gun atmosphere, the toy guns and TR hunting. As they got older, he would introduce them to real guns and target shooting and hunting. The first one to get a real gun was Ted, as the oldest boy, and TR gives him a small hunting rifle right before dinner. It's too dark to go out and shoot with it. TR is in his dressing room on the second floor getting ready for dinner. Ted brings the gun to him and says, "Father, is this a real gun or is this another toy?" And TR says, "You must promise not to tell Mother." Points the gun up at the ceiling and fires a bullet into the ceiling plaster. Luckily for both of them, it didn't make a lot of noise, didn't create a lot of smoke, and the hole was small. So Edith Roosevelt never figured out what they had done, otherwise they would have both been in deep disgrace. TR loved animals, even though he hunted a lot of them. The children acquired that interest as well. Sagamore Hill was basically a zoo farm as well as a working farm. There was a huge menagerie of animals turning over all the time. Archie had his pet, pet badger named Josiah. Lots of dogs. They had guinea pigs all over the place. And they would name them for famous Americans, whether they were male, regardless of whether they were male or female guinea pigs. The most interesting pet was a black bear named Jonathan Edwards, after the famous preacher. When the dogs died, they ended up in the pet cemetery under this rock with their names, which is still there north of the house. So TR is famous. TR is very interested, has visitors coming all the time. And Edith, who's kind of quiet, had said repeatedly in letters to friends and family that she'd be fine if it was just immediate family and no visitors at all, but it doesn't work out that way. So the dining room was constantly filled with guests almost every day. And Edith has to cope with that often at last minute notice. So she wrote her sister in 1899 that she had left Oyster Bay on a Thursday after having, quote, ordered lunch for 9 to be ready on Sunday. And by the time I got back, my lunch had grown to 22, including the Governor General of Canada. And besides the daily guests dropping in, favorite guests like Cecil Spring Rice, the British diplomat who was TR's best man at the wedding, might come for weeks or a month. And he just had to basically accommodate all those folks. In September 1901, McKinley is assassinated. TR is now president. Sagamore Hill becomes the summer White House. This is what TR looks like at that period. His staff moves into rented headquarters in Overbank in downtown Oyster Bay, and he gets into this new routine. They have to put the first telephones into Sagamore Hill because before that, TR doesn't like technology, so you'd have to call the drugstore in Oyster Bay. Boy would get on a bicycle, ride 2 miles to Sagamore Hill to fetch TR into town to pick up the phone at the drugstore and talk. So that's not going to work with the president, so they put 2 phones into Sagamore Hill. So every morning, the staff would come out with correspondence and TR would dictate letters. They also attract a lot of media because he's always been interesting, but now he's president. So a lot of the newspapers and magazines are coming to do profiles of TR and his life at Sagamore Hill. This is my favorite, and you see TR on the front cover with a rake. And this is not something he affects. He loves to be out on the farm, cutting trees down, helping to harvest. So it makes a good image for a president to be athletic and outdoorsy, but this is really who he is. This is the front page. TR loves to chop wood. He does it every afternoon. He's got 7 axes lined up by the front door. He uses one, and then the farm manager sharpens it and just rotates through his collection. And the magazine article talks about the day in the life of the president, and they say that he bounds out of bed no later than 7 a.m., takes a shower bath in water as cold as he can get it, eats breakfast, and then goes for a ride with his wife or children or cousins, comes back about 10:30, and his secretaries come up from town, and they spend a couple of hours doing correspondence before lunch. And then after lunch, starting at 1 o'clock, he receives visitors. But he continues to do what he did as governor, which is at 4 o'clock sharp. He would break off whoever he was talking to in the library and play with children. So one day in that summer, the diplomats in the library talking to TR about problems in Cuba. 4 o'clock comes, and the children gather quietly by the door, and they don't want to interrupt. And then it gets later and later, and then finally one of them says, "Cousin Theodore, it's after 4. So he says, "By Jove, so it is. Why didn't you call me earlier?" So he breaks off his interview and goes out and plays with the children. Initially, the press is all over Sagamore Hill. TR says this is not working, so he says imposes a rule that only 2 reporters can come in on any given day. They can figure out who those are going to be amongst themselves, unless he calls a press conference, in which case they can all come. But there's still media sort of sneaking around and looking for stories. And if they can't find Roosevelt, they try to get the children to talk because they're very smart kids growing up, having lunch with famous people and being expected to be part of the conversation. So one day, one of the reporters corners Quentin, the youngest, and started asking questions about TR and what he does during the day. And Quentin, who's much wiser than his years, would suggest 3 answers. "I see him occasionally, but I know nothing of his family life." So he's getting a lot of press coverage. The editorial cartoonists love TR because he's so colorful. And they love the fact that he's spending his summers in quiet backwater Oyster Bay. So you start to see cartoons like this, all roads lead to Oyster Bay, and TR is up there in Oyster Bay with this whole assemblage of media and politicians, coming to see him. And there's another one. The president's family are at Oyster Bay seeking rest and privacy, and there's all this chaos going on around them. He does try to have some semblance of a normal family life. They do camping. They go out rowing in the afternoon. They camp out, which TR says is open to anyone who can dress himself and understand that once off, all ills from mosquitoes to a downpour of rain must be borne not only uncomplainingly but cheerfully. He also, a lot of these, he managed to avoid the Secret Service and the press corps and go off and have some private time. The most famous example is that he and Ted and some of their cousins do an overnight ride through the rain, 35 miles to Sayville to visit TR's cousin John. They have breakfast and then ride back, and the Secret Service knows nothing about this whole episode. Edith is sort of a worrywart, and she worries about his safety, knowing that McKinley has been assassinated and that he might be a target. And in that first summer, it turns out to be something that she should have worried about. TR is home, and a farmer from Syosset shows up in a buggy, claims that he has an interview with the president to talk about his brother who has been fired from his job. And the Secret Service and the other guards realize he's a crank and send him away. He comes back a second time and they send him away. Then he comes back a third time, and TR in the house hears the commotion, comes out to check on the porch. The guy reaches into his coat and pulls out a pistol, and luckily the guards wrestle the guy to the ground and take him away. But the farmer admits later that I wanted to kill him. So when TR is in Oyster Bay, everything that he needs to be president comes with him, including the presidential yacht Mayflower. I don't know if you were here yesterday, but in the discussion about the Russo-Japanese War, the Mayflower plays an important role. When he's not using it for social visits or entertaining guests, it plays a very important role in ending the in 1905 ending the war between Russia and Japan, which is kind of stalemated. Both sides ask him to mediate, and he invites diplomats from both countries to come to Oyster Bay, gets them together on the Mayflower, gets them talking, gives them a pep talk, and sends them off to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where 2 weeks later they reach a treaty agreement that gets Roosevelt the Nobel Peace Prize. So he's the first American to ever win any Nobel Prize. Interesting sidelight, in the 2 weeks, he's orchestrating the whole peace talks from Oyster Bay. During that 2 weeks, he decides he wants, as president, he wants to see what submarines are like, because he's helped build up the Navy but has not seen one. So he orders the Navy to send a submarine to Oyster Bay. He goes out and spends an hour or so on the plunger. After the captain shows him how it works, TR pushes him aside and runs the submarine himself for 40 minutes. And then later tells Kermit this is the most fun he's had in his life. More and more people are coming to Sagamore Hill. The house can't accommodate them. So TR and Edith in 1905 decided they're going to build an extension called the North Room on the north side of the house, and this is it under construction. It's a beautiful space, and what's probably the most interesting thing is on the inside wall, which is on the right, and outside on the wall on the left are two carved wooden eagles, and a carved by Hudson Boardman, who later puts TR up on Mount Rushmore. So TR ends up being president for 7 years, 3 years of McKinley's term, and then he's re-elected in a 4-year term of his own. Everybody, including his wife, is saying run for a full second term, but he doesn't want to serve longer than George Washington's 8 years, so he declines to run again. But he knows that he's going to miss the excitement of being president, so as he's getting ready to leave Washington, he plans a hunting safari to Africa with Kermit to get specimens for the Smithsonian. So they head off. Edith uses the opportunity, the boys are all at school, so she decides to take Ethel on a tour of Europe and then meet up with TR and Kermit after their safari, and they do that and have a family vacation. Meanwhile, Alice, the oldest daughter, has married Ohio Congressman Nick Longworth. And when they get back to New York for a hero's welcome, Ted marries Eleanor Butler Alexander. This is not Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady. This is different Eleanor. Right after they get back, they have the wedding, and then Ted and Eleanor provide Theodore with his first grandchildren, Grace, who he dotes on in 1911. So now that they're living in Oyster Bay full-time, they need more staff. And the staff at the White House loved the Roosevelts, and they compete to come to Oyster Bay and continue to work with the family, and they bring some of them back, including James Amos, who's the butler in Washington, assumes that same role in Oyster Bay. Initially, the female servants are living on the third floor of the house. The male servants live either in the barn or in town. But there's not enough room with the additional staff, so they build a cottage, which later becomes called the Gray Cottage, on the property, and Amos and the chauffeur live there, and that's now where this park superintendent lives. So back now as an ex-president, when he's in Oyster Bay, they do hiking and rowing and all the things they used to do before he was president. And Sagamore is still an active farm run by Edith. So when TR doesn't run again, he arranges for his Secretary of War, William Howard Taft, to replace him. Taft is elected and then immediately starts repudiating all the progressive things Roosevelt has done. The entire left liberal wing of the Republican Party splits off to form the most famous third party in American political history, the Progressive Party, which gets the nickname of the Bull Moose Party because TR runs as their presidential candidate. The reporter says, "Are you healthy enough to withstand the campaign?" He says, "I am as healthy as a bull moose," and that becomes the nickname of the Progressive Party. He runs an active campaign. He gets shot in the chest while giving a speech in Milwaukee. He finishes the speech with a bullet in him and then goes to the hospital after talking for another hour. Comes back to recuperate in Oyster Bay, and he's rowing and doing things. And then Eleanor and Gracie come for the full summer of 1912. Eleanor is a very proper only child, very quiet, reserved woman, and she's thrown in now full-time with the Roosevelts, who are pretty rambunctious. She writes later that they would go to sleep late after talking at each other, and then somebody would get up and forget they didn't say something, and the whole family would wake up. And this would happen all the time. She said the telephone rang constantly, and the Roosevelt family enjoyed life far too much to waste time sleeping. Now, as I mentioned, they like to do these picnics where they row up or down Long Island Sound, and stop at a beach for a picnic or overnight camping. So at the end of the summer, Eleanor gets invited as the guest of honor on one of these rowing picnics, and she writes later about having to climb down the hill through clouds of mosquitoes, rowing through the hot sun for 2 hours to a beach that looks just like the one at Sagamore Hill. Then they do a barbecue where they serve ham sandwiches, and she's never had one of those, and baked clams, which she's never had. And she writes about the clam, "Although gritty with sand, it was delicious, but that soon wore off and it became like a piece of old rubber hose." Now, if you look at Eleanor, she's not particularly heavy. At the end of the summer, she had gone through so much physical activity that she loses 26 pounds. The election comes around, TR and Taft split the Republican vote. Woodrow Wilson becomes president, but TR is a third-party candidate who outpolls the sitting president, which is pretty impressive. 1913, Ethel gets married to Dr. Richard Derby of Oyster Bay at Sagamore Hill, so she's now out of the house. 1914, World War I breaks out in Europe. TR wants to do what he did in the Spanish-American War, which is form a volunteer unit and take lead it into battle. Wilson, who just narrowly became president, sees 2 problems with the idea. Roosevelt is getting older and is not in particularly great health. He doesn't want to put him in a situation where he'll die and become a martyr. He's also afraid that he won't die, he'll become another war hero all over again and then run for president again. TR at this point is the most popular person on the planet, and Wilson knows that, so he doesn't want to give them the opportunity for more coverage. All four of the Roosevelt boys do get into the war, and if you look on the right side, you can see this, they call the service flag with the 4 stars representing that the family has 4 sons in battle. Now, they're worried about their sons, because they could be injured or killed. Meanwhile, TR has to stay home, so he campaigns to sell war bonds. Leading up to the New York State passing a women's suffrage bill, he obtains women's suffrage delegates, and he's a big supporter of women's rights. So he dresses them at Sagamore Hill, he talks to Boy Scouts, he's a big supporter of the Boy Scouts. But, he basically chases the fact that he has to stay home while his sons are fighting. But his health is also getting worse because in 1914, looking for excitement, he co-leads a trip down an Amazon tributary in Brazil to discover where the River of Doubt actually goes. He gets malaria and tropical diseases and is so ill that he can't even sit up, and he begs Kermit, who's been sent along by his mother to protect TR. He begs Kermit to leave him behind, but Kermit knows if he goes home without his father, his mother will never forgive him. So they manage to get TR out of the jungle, and he barely survives. But he suffers from severe health problems ever since, to the point that in 1918 he's in Roosevelt Hospital for several months and almost dies of fever. And part of the problem with his health is he's worried about the children. With good reason. Archie gets hit by a shrapnel from an artillery shell. It breaks an arm and a leg. Ted gets gassed by poison gas in France. But the one they're most worried about is Quentin. As you can see, TR is deteriorating here in 1916. Quentin, being like TR, decides to go into the most dangerous branch of the military, which is being a fighter pilot. And this is the age of the Red Baron, where you're up close and personal with your opponents. And in July 1918, Quentin shoots down his first German plane, becomes something of a war hero. And then only 10 days later, an Associated Press reporter who's a friend of TR shows up on the porch with a heavily censored telegram from the government indicating that something has happened to one of the Roosevelt boys. TR knows right away it has to be Quentin because the other boys are not in active battles at this point. But it's not clear what happened to Quentin, so he tells the reporter, don't say anything to anybody, come back when you know something more concrete. So TR doesn't even mention it to Edith, but she either overheard the conversation or suspects something is wrong because her diary for that day is blank, and she's never done that before. The reporter comes back the next day with confirmation that Quentin has been shot down by 2 German fighter planes over German lines, and he's been buried with full honors by the Germans. TR goes into a real tailspin over that. He ends up in the hospital in New York again for 44 days with Edith staying in the room with him. Manages to come back. He's just turned 60. He comes back in time for Christmas dinner, served at the house by Alice, Ethel, and Archie. But initially he can move around and he's entertaining visitors, but his health continues to go downhill. And then finally he's basically, a picture of him aging. Eventually he ends up spending all of his time in the gate room on the 2nd floor, which is the former child's nursery. It's the warmest room in the house, and that's where he's the most comfortable. So he's writing editorials for newspapers and answering letters. But the first Sunday in January of 1919, he's really ill and failing fast. So he and Edith are reading poetry to each other, and as it starts to get dark, he says, I'm tired, and he asks James Amos to put him to bed. 4 o'clock in the morning, the live-in nurse wakes up Edith and says her husband has stopped breathing. And she runs in and then writes in her diary that her husband had a sweet, sound sleep. This is TR is still the most interesting and popular person on the planet. His death gets huge media coverage. So he's died actually of an embolism, but he's had rheumatoid fever and all kinds of other things that contribute to it. What's interesting is he's laid out and stayed in the North Room under a Rough Riders flag. The next day, they have the funeral service at Grace Church in Oyster Bay. In keeping with the custom of the time, Edith and the other women stay in the North Room and they read through the service that will be given at the church, but they don't go to the church. They all rendezvous at Young Cemetery between Oyster Bay and Sagamore Hill. TR is buried as the 26th president up 26 steps in the cemetery, and Edith will follow him 29 years later. Edith loves to travel, as does TR. The first inclination after becoming a widow is to sell the house and travel. This is her passport. Ted and the other children beg her not to sell the house, even though they're scattered around. They basically say, we need a place to have the center of the family, even if we're not there all the time. And she agrees, but she does travel a lot. Also, it's important, a lot of admirers of TR and friends of hers keep coming to visit, and she entertains them, particularly on the anniversary of TR's death. And these pilgrimages go on for a couple of decades, and then people trail off, and it's just really the children and 15 grandchildren keep coming. And Edith is getting old. She's got heart problems, and she's always been very kind of quiet and private. So she writes a friend after one of these visits by the whole family. She said, I like to see their little faces, but I prefer to see their backs. She spends her time working on the 3-acre gardens, writing letters. It's becoming more and more private. Meanwhile, ever since from the month that TR dies, the Theodore Roosevelt Association has been approaching Edith about selling the house to make it a museum, and she keeps saying thank you, but no, because the house is going to go to Ted and Eleanor when I'm gone. So this is an ongoing dialogue. So finally, by 1937, Ted and Eleanor have been living in rented houses for 27 years. They're tired of waiting, so they persuade Edith to give them 4 acres on the property on the Cold Spring Harbor side in the apple orchard, and they build a house called Old Orchard for themselves, which is now the museum and staff headquarters at Sagamore Hill. Edith continues to deteriorate, and she falls and breaks a hip, ends up in the hospital for 5 months, and then you can see that she's starting to show her age. And finally, in September 1948, she lapses into a coma and dies at age 87. The discussion about turning Sagamore Hill has revived even before her death. She agrees in principle that because Ted has his own house, he's never going to live in the main house anymore. So she agrees that the house should go to the Roosevelt Association. But they never finalized the deal before she dies, which puts it in an interesting problem because the TR has 11 heirs to the property after Edith dies. And the family lawyer and the relatives realize if they divide the ownership 11 ways, the only way to do that would be to sell the property and divide the money. So the discussions with TRA ramp up. Ethel is on the board of the TRA, so she becomes like the middle person making everything happen. So they finally make a deal 34 years after TR dies in 1948. So the property is sold. The State Association starts raising money. They also, TR's birthplace on 20th Street in Manhattan has been demolished. They buy the property and reconstruct the birthplace, which is still there now, and get ready to open Sagamore Hill. The problem is it's in an incorporated village of Cove Neck, which is all estates, and the idea of having all these tourists flocking to Cove Neck, they find is not a really great idea. When they have a public hearing to discuss the idea, almost everybody is opposed, including 2 of TR's cousins who live nearby. So the idea seems dead, except Nassau County, the town of Oyster Bay, and the state legislators for the Oyster Bay area all are really dedicated to seeing this open to the public as a museum. So they began working on end runs around the village. The best one is legislation passed in Albany in 1951 that says the house of a former president can be turned into a museum regardless of the local zoning. So the village is outflanked and the museum plan goes ahead. Edith in the last 20 or 30 years has not spent any money on keeping the house, so it's literally falling apart. So they started doing renovations and they do some alterations to deal with the public. They built a parking lot. And now it's interesting, they saved the house and opened it to the public, which is a good thing, but they also talked to the National Park Service about how they should operate the property. The Park Service says return it or keep it as close to the way it looked when the Roosevelt family lived there as possible. And that's if you go to most presidential houses like Mount Vernon or the Hermitage or Monticello, that's what you see. They're like time capsules of the original footprint. So the Roosevelt Association hears this from the Park Service and then proceeds to ignore all their advice. They pave over the gardens and some of the farm fields to build a parking lot, and then they build a visitor center there. And they do a bunch of other things that, by current preservation standards, are pretty awful. The Park Service says if you need, one of the village objections is there's not enough good access roads. So the Park Service says, well, if you're going to build a new access road, improve the old carriage road to the house, which goes up from the background through the trees to the front door. Nassau County decides they want something more prominent, more direct, so they condemn and buy property and build the current access road in the foreground, which gives you that really nice view of the house as you're coming in, but it also ruins the whole historic nature of the property. And you sit on the porch, and you see the road, which the Roosevelts never did. They could see right out to the water. So they put bathrooms in the ice house next to the house. They put wider staircases, and do things you need to do to make it a museum house. And then they make some more strange decisions. They restore the gun room on the third floor to its original appearance. They build the visitor center right by the parking lot, and open the house in 1953. President Eisenhower dedicates it with former President Hoover, there. 20,000 people show up, 10,000 people show up, which is a pretty big deal. And all the Roosevelt surviving women are there with grandchildren in the foreground. So initially, you could see the third floor, the gun room, you could see the first floor. The second floor, where most of the bedrooms are, is gutted, including Alice's bedroom, which they turned into a gift shop. So most of the third floor and most of the second floor is just exhibit space with no indication of how the family lived there. The other thing they do that's really weird is there's full documentation of what was in the house and where it was between the surviving children, photographs, newspaper accounts, inventories from the wills. So they know where every object in the house was when the family lived there. They bring in a curator to help set up the house in the Museum of Art, Metropolitan Museum of Art in the city as a family friend. And she and Edith, she and Ethel and the other family members say, well, we know how the family lived there, but this was a Victorian house. We should decorate it as a generic Victorian house. So they ignore all the way the family lived there and set it up as like any general Victorian house, which is again something that would not be done by current preservation standards. They do turn Alice's bedroom back into Alice's bedroom after they open the visitor center and gift shop in the parking lot. So the house is a big success. Lots of people are coming. They're charging admission, but they're losing a lot of money because it's so expensive to run Sagamore Hill and the birthplace. And they decide the future of the property and the financial salvation of the association is to get the National Park Service to take over both sites. Congress passes a bill to that effect. President Kennedy signs the legislation, and Sagamore Hill and the birthplace in Manhattan become the 17th and 18th National Historic Sites run by the Park Service. Park Service now can do what they suggested to the TRA initially, which is make it look like it did when the Roosevelts were there. So they start doing things. They do a study that shows 500 objects in the house are in the wrong place. They close the house for restoration and then remove all 500 objects. This is the bedroom, the master bedroom, the way the TRA set it up, particularly with the armoire on the left wall. Edith Roosevelt was practical. She put furniture where it made sense. She didn't care what it looked like. So even though this bedroom set came from TR's parents, she always kept the armoire down the hall in the nursery because she needed a place for linens for the babies. Also makes the room pretty cramped, if you notice. So the Park Service put it back the way it was when the family lived there. The armoire is back down the hall, and the bed is on the opposite wall where Edith and TR used it. In the that was 1990. In 2004, the Park Service does the first ever master plan for the property. The preferred option that they recommend is returning the property fully to the original appearance, which means getting rid of the parking lot and the visitor center, bringing back the farm fields and gardens. The Roosevelt Association, which has donated the property to the Park Service, and with a $500,000 endowment, opposes the idea. They said people like to be able to park right by the house rather than down the hill and take a shuttle. And they said the neighbors will be upset if we move any of the visitor services closer to their houses, which is true. But because the Park Service doesn't want to fight with the Roosevelt Association, the plan dies, and they basically keep the site the way it was and is. But they do try to bring it back in certain ways. The apple orchard is died off, so they replant that around the old orchard mansion. And they do small projects, but meanwhile, they don't have enough money to maintain the house. So the house is deteriorated. This is the porch rotting away with dry rot. So they're trying to get money from the Park Service to do a big restoration. And finally, starting in 2012, they get enough money to close the house and do work. And the more they look at the house, the more work it needs. And what was supposed to be a year or two of work turns out to be 3 years, and the budget balloons to $10 million. So they basically have to do everything from the roof to the foundation and everything inside. They replace shingles, they restore the windows. They take out 14,000 objects out of the house to protect them during the construction. Things like the elk heads in the north room that are too fragile to move. They bring in a specialized carpenter who protects them by boxing them in sight. The bricks are falling out of the fireplace in the library, so they repoint them. The wallpaper in the dining room and the living room is fading and falling off the walls. So they remove it, take it to Boston, and restore it, and then they're putting it back here. So everything they do is to make the house more historically accurate, with a couple of exceptions. The main one is the north room was originally shown with, when they put an electric light, it was kept at the level of the original gas light, which meant if you stood by the railing there, you could only see halfway back into the room. You couldn't see the far reaches, you couldn't see the guts of the boardwood eagle on the far wall. So they put in LED hidden lights, but they raised the light level to modern standards, even though it's not historically accurate, because it's the most spectacular room in the house, and they want people to be able to see it. But a lot of the work they did is mechanical systems, heating, ventilation that you can't see. But they also restored a lot of things that the Roosevelt Association did wrong in the 50s. The house was built with a light and air shaft to get light into the main part of the house and get humidity out. The Roosevelt Association, for some reason, took that out, and the result, as you can imagine, was more heat and more humidity, less light. So after flirting with the idea of putting air conditioning in and abandoning that because the house has never been air conditioned, and change in the climate, they thought to actually destroy the house. So they went back and they rebuilt the original air and light shaft. This is where it comes up in the attic by a vent, and it runs down. This is the second floor where it starts in the closet, and then there's a opening skylight that leads to the first floor to let light in and air out. So they replaced that. This arch on the north side of the house was boxed in and extended out to be a room for the tour guides hired by the TRA to wait between tours, because it's not original. The Park Service removed that, brought back the original arch and stairs. So after all this work is done, they bring everything back. This is Sue Sarna, who spoke yesterday about the project. Everything's unpacked. You can see the old kids now, like the boxes are gone. Everything's going back into place. And on July 12, 2015, they reopened the house to the public with 2,000 people waiting to get into the house, which, if you haven't been there, is gorgeous. I mean, it looks just like it did when it was built in the 1880s. So the Park Service is continuing to try to bring the property back. They have plans to replant some of the original gardens. The visitor center burned down in December, which is actually turned out to be a good thing because now they can get rid of it quicker and build. Their plan was to get rid of the visitor center because it's not original and it's visually intrusive, and turn the new barn, which is just south of the parking lot, into a visitor center. So the building is, the visitor center is there, but it's gutted. So rather than rebuild it, they're going to tear it down and move ahead more quickly to make put the visitor center into the new barn, which will fit better with the property. But so you're going to continue to see this gradual effort to bring the property back to the way it looked in the early 1900s. But that's the end of the story for now. If you haven't been there, I strongly encourage it. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any. Yes, sir.
So a visit that was made to the house to see the president by a group of scouts in and around 1916 or 17, I think, maybe a year or two before Roosevelt's death. Over in Huntington, you know, through the Historical Society, we've been able to gather a couple of photos that have some evidence of that. What might or might not be in the archives from Sarno or the Harvard or anywhere that could maybe corroborate some of the information we're finding out about a visit that scouts had to the house?
As you can see in that picture, the scouts are there all the time. Theodore Roosevelt Scouts, and you know they named the I guess the Nassau County Council of Boy Scouts is named after him.
But this was a visit from Huntington.
Yeah. Sagamore Hill might have something. The Library of Congress has a lot of photographs of TR at Sagamore Hill. Harvard at the Houghton Library has a big TR photo collection. But I would start with Susanna because, I mean, if they don't have it there, she knows what's out and where it is. She can point you. I mean, finding a photograph of that particular group of scouts might be difficult, but I mean, I don't think that one photo what they gave me is unique either. So. Yes, sir.
Do you know the fate of the original Roosevelt children, besides Clinton?
When they were born?
No, I mean, what happened to them?
Oh, what happens? Okay. Ted is probably the most interesting. He tries really hard to follow his father's footsteps, runs for governor of New York and against FDR, and creates this huge family split between the Democratic Roosevelts up in the Hudson and the Republicans in Oyster Bay that continues, this feud continues into the, about 20 years ago they finally buried hatch. I'm sorry, they don't run against each other. What happens is FDR is running for governor, Ted campaigns against him during the campaign, which creates the family split. He goes into the Army for World War II, becomes brigadier general. He's the first general to land on the beaches of D-Day after the Normandy invasion. He's got a bad heart, and he dies of a heart attack 2 weeks later. He's buried in the National Cemetery in Normandy. After that, years later, Quentin is disinterred from where he died in France and buried next to Ted in Normandy. And every time the president goes to that cemetery, they always go to see the two Roosevelt graves. Kermit is like his mother. He's quiet. He's fragile psychologically. He joins the Army. He gets sent to the Aleutians during World War II. And for a quiet, depressed type of person, the climate and the isolation is the worst place you could send him. He comes back from a visit to his mother, goes back to Alaska, and then shoots himself in the head. Archie is a businessman, lives a long age. Alice marries the congressman and becomes the social doyen of Washington, has salons that everybody comes to because she's so clever. She's the one that says, that, TR has to be the bride at every wedding and the body at every funeral. And the press, just loves to quote her. She lives to be a long age. Ethel basically becomes sort of a housewife to her doctor husband, who lives a long life in Oyster Bay, involved in a lot of historical organizations who are missing.
Archie?
Yeah, Archie is a businessman and has a successful career. He lives for a while at Sagamore Hill, and Tweed, who introduced me, lived there growing up for part of his childhood. Very interesting family. If you go to Sagamore Hill in the Old Orchard Museum, there's a big exhibit on all the children and what happens to them. Anybody else? Okay, well, thanks for coming.